is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another preview slash prediction for the Detroit Lions, man. It is week 5. It's Lions, Panthers, and the Lions are eyeing 4-1. They're heavy favorites to do so. So will they? Let's get it started. Welcome everybody to our video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, we are back with another one of these breakdown preview slash prediction videos. I'm continuing to try to make these things shorter as we go through the season. That's the goal. That's the plan today. So I'm not gonna mess around. We're gonna get right to it. And before we get to the offense or the defensive side of the ball, because watching this team, there were some things that I didn't think completely matched up when you just look at the stats, like Bryce Young. There was a lot of things that I liked about Bryce Young, and I think when you look at his numbers, you first off see that he didn't play in every game, so it was a little bit weird watching back because it was like, all right, well, now that Andy Dalton's in the game, so this is a little bit different than seeing Bryce Young. So you see a progression, then it stops, then he comes back, but there was a lot of things that I liked about Bryce Young. I think you can understand why this guy was the top pick in the draft when you just watch him. And then defensively, kind of like Atlanta, they're pretty tight in the back end. Maybe they don't have the biggest names. They're missing some players due to injury. There is one key player that could be in, could be out. We'll see this week for them. That could be more of something that we find out on Sunday when the inactives show up before the game. But as of now, this is a pretty nice secondary that doesn't have a ton of big names back there, but you like the way that they play together, and we know that they're a pretty good defense just as a whole. So we're going to dive into all that in a second, but before we do, we got to start off with that injury report first because it is Friday and we have some designations. Now, the rest of the designations will be listed, of course, on Sunday when we get the inactives, but for now, here's what we know. We'll start with the Lions first. We know Jason Cabinda is out with a knee injury, second straight week. Expect to see Darrell Daniels once again mixing into that role. And Brian Branch, this is the one that I think we all kind of feared. Now, according to Dan Campbell, didn't seem promising that he was going to play this week, which as we know, he's not going to. Brought up the fact that they did not place him on IR, and they're optimistic that maybe they could get him back for week 6 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So maybe they could see him next week and that this isn't going to be a long-term injury. But he's going to miss this week, and it sounds like Will Harris is going to step into that role. Now, the biggest thing I'll say about this is we're expecting to see Emmanuel Moseley's debut as a Lion at outside corner this week. But it doesn't sound like we're going to see him for a majority of the snaps. He may just mix in here and there, potentially some with Jerry Jacobs and some with Cam Sutton, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but mixing in potentially with both. But he did say that Jerry Jacobs would be out there a lot of the time. So maybe just to kind of offset skill sets a little bit, potentially. And this could also be out of skill set potentially. Keep an eye on the fact that Cam Sutton, he's very physical, but he's not the biggest guy in the world. And with Jerry Jacobs, he's a physical cornerback that can definitely get in there and affect some of these screens that they like to run. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but keep an eye on that. But we also know that Cam Sutton does have a background of playing in that nickel slot role. So even though it sounds like, according to Dan Campbell, that they're going to be playing Will Harris and he's going to start in that role, we know things change, especially as the game goes on. There is a chance that the Lions could kick in Cam Sutton to that slot role during the game potentially, or if they just need another defensive back for whatever reason, and allow Moseley to start on the outside. But of course, that may be giving him more snaps than they want to. So I could see why they are maybe not looking at making that kind of move. And they also have trust in Will Harris, but that's going to be a key one. And we saw this a little bit in the preseason with Adam Thielen. He is their go-to guy offensively. When you watch them, any crucial down, you just expect the ball to go to that guy. And there are teams that will literally throw extra bodies to take that guy out of the play. To move on to the players that are doubtful for the Lions, we have St. Brown dealing with an abdomen injury. Now, he did not participate once again, so it doesn't sound great. But when he talked to the media, you know, he tried to make it sound like, hey, he might be out there this weekend. So this could come down to a game time decision. He's listed as doubtful, which is not great, especially when you don't practice. But he could play this weekend. It would just have to probably come down to a game time decision. It doesn't seem like it will, and if he doesn't, expect Khalif Raymond to just step into that slot role. And then also we have James Mitchell, who popped up today with a new injury, dealing with a hamstring injury. So really possible that he misses this game. He was listed with limited participation, but he popped up today. So he could absolutely miss this game, and we could be looking at going into some of the tight end depth we have. And then we have a ton of players that are questionable, but for the most part, it's a lot of good news here. The bad news is Jahmyr Gibbs, who is new to this list with a hamstring injury. I don't know that he's going to play this week because of this. On average, according to PFF, running backs dealing with hamstring injuries miss on average 2.8 games, but we don't know the severity of it with Jahmyr Gibbs. What we do know is that he's listed as questionable, and he had limited participation, even though it popped up today in practice, it sounds like. So because of that, maybe there's a better shot that he plays than a guy like James Mitchell. Maybe that's the case. I don't know for sure, but maybe that's a way to look at it, as a promising way to look at it. So I wouldn't rule him out. There's a reason he's listed as questionable and not doubtful, but it's not great news today. Outside of that, though, a lot of good. Josh Reynolds dealing with a groin injury, questionable, but Dan Campbell seemed to think that he was going to play. Jameson Williams, of course, he's coming back from a suspension, so I believe he'll have to be activated tomorrow and Saturday. Could be wrong on that. Also, keep an eye on Julian Okwara, because if he is activated to the Lions 53-man roster, which he's eligible for, next up would be Josh Paschal. That would happen on Saturday. And a quick point to that, just because I reminded myself with St. Brown, even though, again, no participation, he has been seen working with the trainers off to the side like Josh Paschal, trying to prove that he can get out there. So we'll see if that's the case. It would be huge to have him. It would be absolutely massive to have that guy. And then out on the offensive line, again, I would say some pretty good news here. It sounds like Decker's playing, even though he's questionable, and Big V with his knee injury, it sounds like he's going to be back, and according to Dan Campbell, they're hoping for him to be back, at least in some capacity. I don't know what that capacity would be. Maybe he rotates with Graham Glasgow. Maybe if he doesn't feel right, they take him out. But it looks like he may be starting, which will get the Lions' full offensive line back intact once again. I'm just glad to hear this, that it doesn't sound like it's super long-term here with Big V. That's excellent news. As we touched on, Julian Okwara, questionable, but again, his clock has begun, so he's 16 days now left. Emmanuel Moseley, we talked about him potentially making his debut, and then Kirby Joseph, the safety, looks like he could be on his way to playing for the Lions this weekend. We haven't seen him in a few weeks now. We've also are without CJ Gardner-Johnson, but Iffy and Tracy have stepped into big-time roles there. I think if for whatever reason, if there was a setback and they feel like he couldn't go, I would be confident with the safeties that we do have based on the team that we're playing. But Kirby Joseph's natural ball-hawking ability, tied along with what he's added as a man coverage safety and also his aggressiveness attacking in the box, I could see Kirby Joseph making a splash play in this game. So this actually could be massive to have Kirby Joseph back this week. And then Frank Ragnow's going to play. And then on to the Panthers side, I won't spend as much time here, really just touch on the key ones. Dante Jackson, he is one of their starting corners. They don't have J.C. Horn. He'll be likely coming off of IR at some point soon here, but they don't have J.C. Horn. And Dante Jackson is listed as questionable. He did not play this past week. They've had to go to the backups. Jameson, you have C.J. Henderson, the former top pick in the draft, really good athlete. And then at slot, they've been leaning on Troy Hill, and also a guy like Jeremy Chin, who can basically play every spot within that defense. You can see Frankie, the linebacker, is also placed on here, but he didn't have a designation, so it sounds like he is going to play. Miles Sanders, same way there. Deshaun Williams as well. And then Austin Corbett, maybe the other big one I would say out of this list. We're not going to see Steven Sullivan, it doesn't sound like, the tight end. And Austin Corbett, the offensive guard, is not going to play this week. He has been ruled out. And why that's key is because this is definitely not the strength of this team. Now, look, all the stats, all the metrics, I see them, and it doesn't look great, but I'm telling you, when you watch them, they don't look that bad. Now, I believe in our defensive front, so I think we can make teams, look a little bit worse than maybe they actually are, but I don't think they're a terrible offensive line. I think they're pretty good in communication. They pick up blitzes seemingly pretty well, but they have real questions, I would say, more so in the interior than anything. They have Icky on the outside, top pick. Right tackle, they've had a pretty consistent presence in Moton, okay, but it's really been the interior. It's Zavala, the rookie out of NC State, who's had, I think, his most struggles in pass protection. If there's one thing I'll say about that guy, on passing downs, make sure you have somebody rushing against him. All right, I've seen too many teams drop out a guy, and they're like, oh, we're not rushing him. It's like, dude, rush that guy. Go at him. If you can get that one-on-one, go at him. Also at center, I think there's been inconsistencies with Bozeman, and they've had Maves at right guard. Really, the most inconsistency comes with that entire offensive line in pass protection, because even at right tackle, they can give up some power rush opportunities. So for the most part, I don't think it's as bad as some of the stats show, but it's definitely not the strength of this team. So that is a big loss for them not coming in with him in this game as well. He tore his ACL this past season, so he hasn't been back for a while. Start with the Panthers offense first, because this was the most tricky, I think, part of everything for me here, is just really trying to figure out what this offense was really about. When you look at some of the stats, they're really not great across the board, rushing or passing. Rushing, it's not terrible. 4 yards per carry, which is 21st. It's actually what we're averaging on a season. 95.3 yards per game. We're averaging much more than that, but that puts them at 21st, and then 20th in expected points added. And then you also look at the efficiency, that's listed at 26th. So it's definitely below average, and I think it is when you watch them, but they're not terrible at rushing the football. We know they have two good backs, Miles Sanders, and also Chuba Hubbard has played a big part in that run game as well, winning that battle. And I know we talk about the defensive line a lot, but I think you really have to circle the defensive line within this matchup just by the style of how they rush. So keep an eye on occasionally. Aaron Glenn has not been a heavy blitzer this season. I think more of that is a week-by-week thing than we're just not going to blitz this year. I think it just depends on who you're facing. But like a team Minnesota, for example, I saw them blitz a lot. And I think occasionally they were blitzing to try to stop the run. Because, of course, if you blitz the edges, you can slant inside. You can get those one-gapping opportunities and potentially get some tackles for loss. So I do believe the key is going to come back to stopping the run, because you'll see a lot of times, especially if they run the ball on first down, it's not very successful. That second play, you can usually expect it's going to be some sort of screen pass. This is a team team, their biggest strengths offensively is not pass protection. It's probably more so run blocking, and it's also not the receiving core that they have. Not to say that it's bad. They have Mingo in the mix. They have Terrace Marshall. I mean, they have some high draft picks. Adam Thielen is legit, and Bryce Young, I really like what he's done off schedule. We'll talk about that more in a second. But the run game is going to be very important, but I really circle our defensive line. I've seen team put 8 players in the box to stop their run. Now, you're not going to do that consistently, but I am curious to see how many 2-deep safeties the Lions actually utilize. Outside of third down situations, of course, in those spots, yeah, go 2 deep, 2-man, Tampa 2, whatever that may be. But on early downs, how consistently do the Lions roll a safety down into the box? Now, of course, that limits your coverage. It puts you in cover 3 looks. It puts you in cover 1 looks defensively unless you're going to roll out of it. Or one very interesting coverage, I think, for this game specifically, and I know we're talking specifics here, but quarters coverage. I really like that idea in this game. It kind of goes back to, especially in passing downs, but it kind of goes back to some of what we've seen from the Lions style, linebackers passing to safeties, taking away the middle of the field. It's a place where they consistently attack middle field and also screens. But I really like the quarters idea. I think it helps you take away the middle field, and you're allowing those safeties to play at an aggressive depth. Not playing 30 yards, off the line of scrimmage, playing more like 10. With that, first off, I think you have to start with the interior of this defensive line. I talked about how the interior of the offensive line is probably not the strength of this team, because it's not. They have some solid players in there. Zavala's a big man. He can definitely block. Mays is also a pretty good blocker as well at right guard. And then, of course, they have Bozeman at center. But I'm really looking for that interior defensive line because this is a heavy inside/outside zone rushing team. A lot of zone rushing scheme from this offense. So I feel like in a way, yeah, they'll mix things up, but you kind of get a sense of how they're going to run the football, which is going to put the emphasis to me on that defensive line, specifically on the interior first, because I think they've done really well this year. Ali McNeil, I look forward to potentially disruption, potential getting into the backfield, forcing some cutback lanes, potentially some negative plays. I'm circling him for just some splash moments in this game. Of course, Benito Jones, he was rocking the fancy outfit in the last game. I think he brought another one this week, or he is going to. The edge defenders. Now, here's why. I think you really have to circle these guys, and this is really everybody comes into play, even more so than just the edge defenders, but you'll see it consistently here, is because a couple things with this offense. First thing, tight ends. They have some really solid tight end blocking inline players, whether that's Tommy Tremble just blowing a guy off the line of scrimmage. They love to utilize their tight ends to block, and they're pretty good at it. Charles Harris, I think, has had really good moments, especially early in the year. Aiden Hutchinson, I expect him to win those battles. John Kaminsky can be thrown into some of those spots depending on the front they're looking at. And don't forget about a guy like Jack Campbell. I'm assuming we're going to see multiple inline tight ends, and they're going to try to potentially put him in the action. It's not necessarily his strength because of his body type, but if he's down there as that Sam backer, expect him to be thrown into the action. Also, the aspect of they love to utilize kind of the extra blocker. I guess that's kind of a way to put it. When you put your receiver in line like a tight end, essentially, but you put him between maybe your outside tight end and your inside tight end, or your outside tight end and your tackle, and you kind of sit that receiver kind of inside both, like an Adam Thielen, for example. Think of what the Lions have done in the past where they'll put St. Brown in there and he'll block up field. They'll do a lot of things like that in these zone runs, but to almost add an extra blocker and trust that their guy's going to be a bigger impact than your defensive back. A lot of their success will come back on cutback lanes, so of course that's where your linebackers and your backside defensive tackles, those edge rushers that need to just be dominant, come into play. But I do think that this is an interior that, again, I think the Lions have the advantage to me on paper, but I don't think it's a massive advantage. I think the creativity is not as much as like, whoa, what are they doing? Who's going to get the ball? I mean, occasionally you'll get like an end around. It's like, oh, look, that was something. But a lot of times I feel like you kind of understand how they want to attack you. Is just, can you win that battle up front? And I think this is going to be a straight up battle for the Lions defensive line, edge rushers, and also linebackers, or even secondary support players that are going to be forced to step in and play the run, specifically that slot cornerback position, which I'm pretty confident about. I'm confident if that was Brian Branch. I'm pretty confident in Will Harris handling that too. If there's one thing about Will Harris, he's a feisty slot cornerback. Now, occasionally, we'll get off blocks a little bit weird, but he'll hit people. So, again, that's going to be a key, I think, in this game, stopping the run. Pass defense side of things, there are two things that stand out to you very quickly, but I would say the biggest one is the amount of screens that this team throws is ridiculous. They have to be the heaviest throwing screens team in the National Football League, and they have some variety with it for sure. They'll utilize jet motion to hit screens. They'll throw bubbles out of the backfield. They'll throw a ton of tunnel screens. They'll put two screens on the same play where he's like, hey, look in one way, let me move that safety, come back, hit this other tunnel screen. They run so many screens. I think part of it is a very big expansion of their run game, because if it's not consistent, consistent, they can kind of go to that on early downs. Again, if the first play isn't very successful, they can try to pick up 4 yards there and put themselves in third and manageable. So it's a real extension of what they do in the rushing side of things without having to consistently drop back. And I think that does help his completion percentage a little bit, but heavy screen team for sure. And then also they're a pretty heavy play action team as well, which just makes sense to, again, kind of help out some of those offensive linemen where you can play the run first as a defensive lineman, and then you're forced to kind of disengage off of that and then rush the passer. So they do those two things. You kind of think back to Atlanta, but screen heavy. I haven't seen a team throw this many screens. It's insane. And there's a couple things I would say about that. Of course, the main focus then has to go on those outside cornerbacks, physicality, playing through blocks. If they stack up two receivers, one's got to get down and press and blow up that screen. And we've seen our cornerbacks have been, I would say over the last 2 years, really good at taking away receiver screens, but they'll do a lot of that tunnel action. I've even seen defenses drop out edge rushers to kind of try to get into those passing lanes. Is a good example of them shutting down the screen at the top of the screen here, and you're going to see it with AJ Terrell jumping this. They're also going to run this backside bubble screen with the running back as well. Now, one thing that we've seen from the Lions against teams that like to run the football, they would just leave Brian Branches at a second safety, and they would take their other typical safety off the field. That way they could roll out into two deep or play one in the box and put 5 guys across the line of scrimmage like this and only use one pure safety. So the question will be, without Branch, do they do that same role with Will Harris, which occasionally we've seen him do, and we know he's a former safety? Or if they wanted to have that same look, will they take a guy like Will Harris off the field and trust Kirby or Iffy that could potentially roll down, play man coverage if they want to, that could play a little bit of that slot role? And I would say this as well, look at it on third downs, because on third downs, a lot of teams will try to, we'll see it, they'll put 2 off-ball linebackers on the line of scrimmage in both A gaps, and then when they see that and they see, okay, 3-on-3, that's even, I'm going to throw a tunnel screen, and we're going to beat you to it. So you'll see a lot of screen looks with this offense. It's going to be a huge key of stopping this offense as a whole, is just trying to get negatives there. Get them into third and long, because again, I think it's a big expansion of, we don't want to drop back and pass consistently. So we're going to run like 30% of our pass plays as screen plays. Watching Bryce Young, there were some things that I really liked. Really, one thing that I liked is he is a very poised quarterback in the sense of he'll stand in, he'll feel the heat, he'll deliver the ball, he works through full field progressions when you watch him. The one little knock I would say is I thought there were examples where the ball would just come out late through progressions, and also maybe not some immediate awareness in terms of, oh, they're showing the blitz here, this guy's going to be open, like that's the hot read. I think there's times where you get inconsistent awareness there, or if they're showing a blitz defensively and it's almost like we're a little bit off in terms of, okay, they're overloading this side, the ball's got to come out, and then you get a free rusher, and it was almost like he was a little bit late to react to that. But outside of it, I like a lot of things. Real escapability. So we always talk about pass rush lanes. He's not the scrambler that takes off and runs all the time, but he has real escapability. Third and long, that play does not end. He keeps plays alive consistently, and also on top of that, very good poise with pressure in his face, finding the checkdowns, attacking the middle. You're going to disguise, you're going to drop out your linebacker school. I'm going to eat over the middle of the field, getting the ball out of his hand consistently. I really liked his poise when I was just watching. See some of the reads that he was making, like, okay, hey, linebacker's still with him. They're in man coverage. Cool, I'm going to come to this, and I'm going to throw the check down. Or, for example, maybe had an idea of what they were kind of in defensively zone-wise, you would see him actively working to hold one key defender to try to set up another route. A lot of times they were dig routes, and he was trying to hold like an underneath zone linebacker or a slot. He was trying to hold him and hit that dig route. Again, you'll see a lot of that middle of the field attacking from this offense, but I did think there was good poise there. The biggest thing is just occasionally you'll get him a tick late, and he'll throw to a window that's late, or he may do something a little bit off script that probably wasn't the best decision, just doing a little bit too much or too aggressively throwing a pass. He's got a hyper quick release when he needs to get the ball out quickly when he feels pressure. You'll see it on RPO usage. You'll just see when there's pressure in his face. And I also would circle the RPO specifically when they get into the red zone, because the way that they're going to test your communication, specifically if you want to go to man, because I like playing man against this team. I do think there's a real matchup there that we can win, but they're going to test the heck out of your communication with the RPO that they tie along to it, right? That run pass option, and he can quickly get the ball out, hit some of his tight ends, work the flats, just slant flats, those kind of things, but just force you to communicate, because if you don't, that ball's going to get out in a hurry. So you'll get that tested defensively. Things that I think that the Lions could look at doing. As I said, some of that quarters coverage I think is a really interesting idea. The downside of that, of course, if you're not rolling into it, you're going to have 2 deep safeties on the play to start the play. So this is one of Young's interceptions on the season. It's kind of a look that I like that we've seen from the Lions sort of this season. You're going to see the safeties lined up over that off-ball linebacker who has the tight end on the play. Once it releases vertical, the safety opens to take on the tight end. Then the tight end breaks inside. Now this backside safety that gets the interception, Bates, on this play, he also has the slot corner inside. So he's going to match that route one-on-one vertical, which leaves him free on the play to slide over, undercut this route, and pick it off. Also, I would look at the Lions being aggressive at the outside corner position. Maybe that's a press alignment, whatever that may be. Obviously, if they stack, someone's got to get down and press. You have to watch for them every time they bunch up one side of the field, because unless your safety is kind of leaking that way and they're in a 3-by-1 set, they're going to hit that screen if it's 3-on-3. So they're going to look for those all the time. So aggressiveness from the outside corners, but also aggressiveness from the safeties, in the sense of it's going to be key to take away the middle of the field. It's the two areas where I see this team consistently attacking: screens and middle of the field. So that idea of where we've seen our linebackers pass it off to the safeties, I like that, but again, there's still good awareness there. We saw it for Bryce Young here, where you can see the linebacker sitting to the inside, safety over top. He makes an audible. All of a sudden, they hit a quick out route, and the tight ends and Adam Thielen's wide open on the play. I don't think you need to disguise a ton, specifically on early downs. I don't think it's smart to consistently put all of your off-ball linebackers in the A-gaps and then drop out on early downs, because all you're doing is giving them those quick hitters opportunities easy, whether that's the screens or that's just sitting down a little over ball right over the middle of the field. Instead, on third down, I think that's fine to kind of try to mix up the offensive line and who's actually rushing / zone looks, like almost showing zone pre-snap and then rolling into a man coverage. I don't dislike that coverage for this game. Now, if you are going to go to man, you got to understand a lot of times, especially if he sees that, and that's kind of the anticipation, is that's what we're going into, you can anticipate that Adam Thielen becomes number one option. Now, we've played a lot more zone this year than maybe in the past. I don't hate man coverage against this team. I really don't, because I think matchup for matchup, you can say that we can win that. The issue, of course, always becomes the guys with the two-way go. It's the slots. It's Will Harris on Adam Thielen, because you're gonna be sure they're gonna be looking for that matchup. So Adam Thielen on third down is the guy you have to circle, regardless of who's matched up on. And it always seems to come back to the little things with Adam Thielen: the route discipline, the timing of his routes, and also selling it through the stem just like this. You can see how he pushes himself into the safety here, who runs that hitch route right underneath him, and then he breaks off his route towards the inside, creating a little bit of a rub. I look for the safety, especially if we're going to go man coverage. Cover one looks, roll down your safety, allow him to play middle of the field, take that away. Consistently cover one robber is something that I really like on third down if you're going to go man coverage. But disguising man and zone looks, the key that I like to that is it can force him to just get through a couple extra progressions, because he may not immediately recognize, like, oh, this guy's going to be open. So you can force him to get through 1, 2, and then come to 3. And like we saw against Green Bay, a lot of times that can come down to, hey, okay, you get him through a couple multiple reads, then we can get pressure on the play. And one more point that I will make, especially on third down: you can decide to blitz early downs to stop the run or on third down, but you have to be aware that, yes, you can get the ball out quickly, potentially limit any opportunity to get the ball downfield. That is true, but he's been pretty good with his recognition of seeing where the blitz is coming from, usually, and getting the ball off without just standing in the pocket and being able to attack immediately off of that. I also will say their running backs have really proven themselves, I think, in pass protection, stepping in consistently and also just slamming dudes. I know our linebackers can blitz, but they're legit, so that'll be a matchup to watch. But they mix between those quarters looks and cover two defensively. Again, you're going to have two high safeties, so if you're doing that, probably the most consistent strength could be the run game of this team, especially if they start to gash you. So I'm not mad if you're trying that. I would just play at aggressive depths if I'm playing two deep safeties to try to get some run support. Maybe you roll in pre-snap, post-snap, that kind of thing. But if it's struggling, yeah, you're going to have to put a safety in the box potentially, because that can be something that they come out with and try to lean on. And you may even come out to start the game like, hey, we're going to play one safety in the box, and then as the game goes on, if we can build a lead, we'll start to drop out a safety to take away those pass plays that you like. Now, this is a coverage that you see a lot of teams play against Carolina, understandably so. They want to keep guys in the box, so you see a lot of cover 3 looks defensively, of course, to stop the run as well. If you're going to play that, again, middle field is key. I look for a guy like Tracy, like we've seen these last few weeks when we play cover 3, plays at an aggressive depth to take away these dig routes or the quick play action hitters like this, because they will use a guy like Terrace Marshall, big body receiver. He'll just sit over the middle. If he looks like a tight end, he'll run these deep dig routes over and over and over. They'll do it with their tight ends. If you're playing cover 6, they'll do the same thing. Start with the run defense of Carolina, because this is probably the weakest part of their team statistically speaking. You look at all the numbers: 4.7 yards per carry, that's 28. 136 yards per game, that's 27th. 25th in expected points added. 32nd in efficiency according to PFF. It is the worst part of their game on paper. Now, they have some dudes on this defensive front, whether that be Derek Brown, former top pick in the draft. He's a really good athlete, but also carries a lot of size, so he can play nose tackle. He can kick out to a 3 technique. Like, he's difficult. And also Shy Tuttle, who I don't think consistently handles himself well against double teams, but what he does do is he consistently sheds blocks. So you can get a lot of blown blocks in the interior, and we've seen it happen to us with a guy like Shai Tuttle. And then on the edge, maybe not as much of the run defense consistency in terms of dominance there from a guy like Justin Houston, who they have, the veteran, and then also Brian Burns. But they do have pass rush upside, specifically Brian Burns, and also a guy like Yetur Gross-Matos, who on pass downs they can kick inside and he can win against guards. So they have matchup pieces. I wouldn't say they're dominant on the front, but they have matchup pieces. I wouldn't put them in that Atlanta category of the interior, but they have guys that can win from time to time. But overall, we even see it at the linebacker position. I don't think it's a bad linebacker position, but they will rely on their defensive line to carry and handle multiple gaps defensively. So offensively, and I know we're a very creative rushing team, and this is kind of just based on what I've seen work with us, because I know we can go to a lot of different looks, which gives us tons of flexibility. We can go power, we can go zone. I mean, we can do a ton of different looks. One thing I do think for the Lions, though, is I really like zone rushing against this team. I like trying to get outside zone, wide zone rushing plays, and maybe not consistently wide, like you need to get to the D gap, but wide zone or outside rushing zone rushing plays to force those defensive tackles to be able to match your quickness. Also potentially get some interior double teams and work up to the second level, because if you win those matchups consistently, they'll play 5-man fronts, they'll put 1 off-ball linebacker, 2 off-ball linebackers. Sometimes you can even motion across to try to get a defensive back into their box. They'll put Jeremy Chin in there and make him run defend. So I think it's a big key that you can win with the zone rushing attack. Not to say there won't be negatives, because they have good players in there, but I think you can consistently lean on that. Also, I'd keep an eye on the duo rushing attack as well, just because, again, you can double team these guys. There are hit and miss results, I think, at their big defensive tackles handling the double teams.
An example like this where they single out Williams, number 96 to 3 technique. Again, you're going to see that jet motion across. Keep an eye on that, because they can shoot a guy into the second level without a follow on this play. But also, this is a duo counter play. So they're going to show one way, hold the linebacker, come back, double team, stronger double team on 96, and punch it into the second level.
You'll see with a guy like Deshaun Williams, he's only 6'1", 295. You could try to double team that guy in the interior. So I'd mix in some of those plays as well. But what I really like for this matchup is something that we just saw, because they'll play like a 4-eye, 1 technique, 3 technique. They'll play that to the strong side, the 4-eye, so they'll kind of give you like an underlook. But one thing I really do like in this game is I like the opportunity to attack with a lot of the fast motion pre-snap, a lot of the jet motion looks, Brock Wright getting on the move. Now, not having James Mitchell takes away a tight end for us, but regardless of who that is, getting that extra body, maybe that's Daryl Daniels, to be able to move, kick, and be an extra blocker, because they're not going to consistently follow. They like to play a lot of zone coverage, which plays into this as well, but they'll shift. Linebackers will move. So one thing you can do is try to get a slot or Jeremy Chin. You could try to get them into the box to play the run, or on top of that, you can get an extra blocker a lot of times. I see a lot of teams use this against them, is utilizing that jet motion to get an extra blocker to lead the way, especially if we can get an outside zone setup and then bounce it outside the tackle box. One thing with Monty, he's done a great job of setting up his blocks offensively. Like, I'm going to show inside that I'm going to kick. He allows those jet motion looks to set up and allows him to kick into, the second and third level offensively. So I would also look at that, but really with Big V back, you want to see dominance from that interior, and I'm hoping that's the case, because I think if they do, which they really could on paper, there'll be some hit and miss, because we've seen it, but if they are dominant on paper, they're one of the best graded offensive lines run blocking this season. We've seen a lot of good there, and I don't think this is the most dynamic, athletic defensive front. I really like leaning into this zone rushing attack, but we'll see, because you can run counter plays. We'll see how much the Lions mix it, but I think it's a real interesting option in this game. Occasionally, I think one of their linebackers, Luvu, I don't know how to say a guy's name, number 49, that was the guy that I circled, because I think occasionally he'll be a little bit late to fill, or maybe he'll miss on a gap where one guy's filling and he'll kind of fill the same area. I think you get occasional lateness there, but they put a lot of stress on their defensive line to be able to handle multiple gaps a lot of times defensively. So again, another thing I do wonder is you'll see Carolina, they'll play 2-eye safety a lot as well. I saw it against Minnesota a ton, a lot of 2-deep safety, if they're going to come out and try to do that, because they are, the first response should be, we got to run the football. Like, it's just simple that we have to run the football against this team. But if they consistently start rolling a safety down, it may change how we look to attack specifically in the pass game. But even still, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions try to lean on some of the ground game, especially without St. Brown this week if he can't play. But on to the pass defense, this is where they're actually not that bad, okay? We see defensively, they're not bad at getting pressure. They're about middle of the pack. They blitz about middle of the pack as well, so they're not bad there. And as I talked about with those defensive front players, the big guy on the interior you got to circle is Derek Brown. having Big V back would be nice, even though Graham hasn't been bad. I mean, he's shown some real quickness. Speaking, I saw a lot of zone coverage out of this team. Now, you'd see cover 3 and cover 4. Those were kind of the most zone looks that I saw defensively. You start off with cover 3. What makes them tough is that they have kind of a matchup piece in Jeremy Chin. They'll utilize him as a sub-down linebacker if you're trying to go, to some shotgun looks, 11 personnel, 3 receivers, shotgun. They'll put him in as a sub-down linebacker, which gives them a little bit of a matchup piece when they want to play underneath zone. He can fly sideline to sideline. Another thing I like is they're pretty aware of the depth that they're getting defensively, understanding like, hey, what is the down and distance? What kind of depth do I need? Don't let this get behind me. So for us, if you want to try those, drive looks offensively where you have the drag, then you have to dig behind it, they're pretty good at getting depth. The one real area that popped out a couple times is that they can have miscommunications defensively. They have at the safety position, they have Von Bell, he's a vet. Lions know him from New Orleans, but they also have Franklin in there who had a pick 6 in one of those cover 3 looks in the red zone, which is an area where we'll play it, and you can see him just jumping on this out route here, picking it off and taking it back. But you'll have some breakdowns occasionally between him and some of their linebackers where they'll give up just things underneath, flat routes, just chip drag, chip flats, just kind of delayed routes. Things underneath can open up a little bit if your pass protection holds up. We've been great against zone coverage over the last 2 seasons with Ben Johnson, so naturally I just have a lot of confidence that it's going to happen again. It always does seemingly come back to the offensive line, but of course because of this I have to circle Khalif Raymond again. Not only if St. Brown doesn't play, but even when he has played, he's been massive against zone coverage. I think he's one of the best route runners in football, but having a guy like Jamison back, tied along with, I think Marvin Jones Jr. might get his first reception, I think, of the season this week, or maybe second, I don't know. I think he may have a reception or a few this year. I think that he has a real opportunity to play a lot in that slot role, which absolutely could be something Lions like to look to utilize, especially with a lot of their motion. They can get the defense to shift a little bit. Look for that guy if they try to get some matchups.
Against a zone-heavy team, I'd like to say Jahmyr Gibbs, but we don't know if he's going to play. If Jahmyr Gibbs did play, I'd love to see him in this game because I think for a lot of the underneath potential opportunity to get him matched up with backers, or even if that's Jeremy Chin, or if they're putting a safety in the box to stop the run and they drop in his zone, to get him matched up underneath with some of those players would be an excellent opportunity for him to be big time in the receiving game, like we thought about coming into the year, but I don't know if he's going to play.
And at the cornerback position, they have Troy Hill, who's probably the most reliable cornerback right now in terms of who's healthy, and I just like the way that he plays. They'll give you a quarters look here. You can see it against the Vikings on this strip, I think, essentially here. But you're going to see how he carries this wheel route. They try to set up against the quarters look a wheel route, which would make sense on paper. Okay, he's an underneath zone defender, but you can see him open up and carry this route, takes it away. Now, the ball doesn't have an opportunity to get off because Derek Brown, but you can see the awareness of him to drop out and cover that up. So he's pretty reliable there, which, more so in zone coverage because of how much they play. It's more about hitting windows, I think, consistently in this game. But outside of that, at outside corner, especially if they're forced to roll a safety down, the next thing that I would circle is the outside corner in terms of not necessarily CJ Henderson. All right, he's not perfect, but he's a good athlete. You'll see it against bigger receivers. Like I saw a really good play against DK Metcalf where he shut it down on the 3rd down. I was like, dude, that was nasty. But you'll get some hit and miss there. He's just a really good athlete, big cornerback. I do think, though, you can look him or opposite of him if the circle Jamison, who is their opposite side corner, and look to see if you can get that matchup going. If they're rolling a safety down and you're getting that one-on-one look, circle that matchup. Josh Reynolds looks like he's going to go potentially Jamison Williams, Marvin Jones Jr. Circle that matchup as an opportunity. We've seen it. We saw a team like the Vikings. They got a one-on-one look, took the shot to Justin Jefferson, popped the touchdown. I do think that Jamison Williams gets at least one shot opportunity in this game, okay? Because I don't know how much he's going to play, but I think just based on their defense alone, especially if they're playing a safety down, I look for the Lions to get at least one shot attempt to Jamison Williams. Don't know if they'll hit it or not, but I think they'll get one shot up to him if they can get a one-on-one look. So the question will be, if he's out there, will that force the defense to say, hey, let's play some sort of 2 safeties, that way we can get a safety over top or double team him, but can we get into a cover 2 or a cover 6, then we can run the football or attack maybe the middle of the field? Or is it going to be like, hey, we're fine with putting him one-on-one, maybe it's just off coverage? Look to that, look to some of the speed out routes, those kind of things, because that's where we saw Jamison effective as well in the preseason, speed out routes, where it's not as complex, but it's, hey, they're backed up, boom, 1-2, hit it. That kind of thing against zone coverage, attacking outside the numbers may have to be more of a crucial point of the game for the Lions this week, getting maybe a little outside their comfort zone, as we've seen, attacking outside the numbers. Some other looks, like you'll see cover 6 if a team goes to, kind of a 3-by-1 look defensively. You'll see some cover 6 that gets mixed in there a little bit.
Dante Jackson, Jameis here at the bottom of your screen, is a little bit of an undersized corner, 5'9", 185, but you see the physicality. They go cover 6, so he has safety over top, so he's able to drive down and break up the screen bubble. But because of that, if you get those singled up matchups, I'm going to talk about in a second, but a guy like Marvin Jones Jr., the back shoulder fade that we tried week 1 that we haven't went back to. Things like that could be a real opportunity. And I'll also touch on screens a little bit, but that's specifically for JAMO because I thought he was so dynamic there coming out of the draft. Also, I guess a little Antoine Green as well.
Number 1 looks man coverage. You'll get some 2-man coverage, usually on like a 3rd down or a 4th down, or maybe you'll even see that in like a goal line situation defensively as well. So you'll get occasional man coverage looks, but for the most part, they play a lot of zone coverage from what I've seen. Don't have an exact number on that, but from what I've seen defensively, I've seen a lot of zone coverage from this defense. The areas that I like to attack offensively, we'll get to players here in 1 second, but I do think anybody that's in line, whether that's the tight end, whether you put a running back there, if Jahmyr Gibbs can go, that could be very helpful. Putting in a slot receiver in line, Khalif Raymond, getting a guy in line could be very impactful. I also think there's a real opportunity to get shot plays because it could force them out of what they're best at. If you're dominating on the run game, then all of a sudden they're forced to get out of that. The best way you take advantage is trying to get a shot over top. And if they're coming into the game saying we're going to take that away and you're not dominant, again, get the shot play. And we saw that last time we played them. Khalif Raymond got a shot over top. DJ Chark got over top. Look for the Lions to try to get one of those. Maybe that's a rollout throwback type of play. Whatever that may be, I think there's a real opportunity to try to get at least one shot in this game somewhere to kind of break it open, try to open up what their defense is doing. So I look for those 2 alignments, and of course Khalif Raymond because he's been great against zone coverage. And then of course if St. Brown's in there, I trust him against any matchup, but really what I'm circling here is because if you don't have St. Brown, now all of a sudden, attention was going to go there, but Troy Hill is one of their more reliable players in the slot, and then they have Jeremy Chin. Without having St. Brown, Jeremy Chin could see a lot of Sam Laporta in this game. Would not surprise me at all. And if that is the case, if he gets a lot of Sam Laporta work, especially if they're trying to play man coverage, then again, that's something that I would keep an eye on. But if it is zone coverage, it kind of opens it up. You're just trying to find matchups. Circle in this one, a guy like Sam Laporta. One, because I could see them playing a lot more zone coverage, but also if they do play man, if we get him on linebacker matchups, and maybe this isn't just Laporta, maybe this is Brock Wright, but if we get them on linebackers, you see a guy like Ruger Hill who's been in there, he's gotten a poor grade against tight ends on the season, and I'll just throw up the list of stats here for Sam Laporta on this season. The Panthers have the 23rd best catch rate allowed against tight ends on the season, and 24th in yards per coverage snap at 4.1 on the season to the tight end position. So again, with how much zone they play, it's an area to attack. We've had a lot of comfortability there, so I would circle a guy like that. Last year, Shane Zylstra, 5 receptions, 26 yards. He also had some touchdowns. I think he had 3 touchdowns in that game, so he became a big-time red zone presence. So we'll have to see what they try to do defensively, how our run game can force them to potentially try to roll their coverage defensively. I'm really circling that outside receiver position to have an impact this week. So with that being said, my key players to watch for in this game, the safety position for coverage, middle field, linebackers, how do they play together? The slot cornerback, of course, because Adam Thielen, really whoever gets Adam Thielen defensively, especially if the Lions are trying to play more man coverage, I'm assuming they're going to send safety help, more so maybe just rolling down, but also they could just strictly put a safety and try to bracket him in.
I would not classify Thielen as a true number 1, but he is their number 1. However, they do have a lot of role pieces like we had with DJ Chark, the deep threat that can run the drag routes. He has a specific route tree that he likes to utilize. They have the Mingos, who was a physical slot. We've seen him have some success at times on matchups, but Thielen is the go-to guy. Then they have their big body, middle of the field, physical tight end blocker.
And then also for screens, then I would say for the defense, definitely the run game because it's probably the most consistent part of their offense. Take that away, get them in 3rd and long. I think there's a lot of poise. I think it's difficult to just blitz the heck out of Bryce Young and have him shook. I haven't seen that yet. I get the idea, but I haven't seen it. But I do think what you can do is if you can consistently force them to have to throw the ball, get them out of the screen world, now you open up like, hey, floodgates open. This is where we take control and we dominate this game. You want to get them to that spot. So to me, it starts with the run first and shutting down the screens. Take away all the run game expansion, shut down the run, get them out of that, allow the floodgates to try to open against this team. So defensive tackles need to win that battle against a physical offensive line, but with quickness, and then also those edge rushers. You got to dominate the tight ends in this game because, look, they try to leave them in the block. Teams have had really good success. They've had really good success against other teams. Our edge rushers should dominate. I'm saying Montgomery goes over 100 yards again. It's kind of my early sense. I don't know if that's that important. I think if he's just good in this game, if Jahmyr Gibbs played, that may not happen, but I don't know if he's going to play, so that's part of the reason I say that. He could have another massive game again. Jameson Williams, I think, gets a one one shot attempt down the field, but would it surprise me if he had more? No. Would it surprise me if Khalif Raymond got one? Not at all. I could see us trying to get down the field, and I think our outside receivers may be a little more impactful this week. It may be more of their week. Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones Jr. may have a reception or two. Maybe he gets going a little bit on the stat sheet, especially without having St. Brown, because if Khalif's in the slot, now Jameson's going to rotate in, but it doesn't sound like he's going to play every snap. So then it comes down to, okay, there's a different impact. Jameson can run the speed outs. Jameson can run the drags, the screens, and I think screens could be a legitimate part, again, of the game plan. If they're going to play two deep safeties, maybe your run game's not consistently at right where you at. Look at the screens. It's been something that other teams have done. That's where you could be involved. And then the other route tree comes in for middle field attacking, where they've been pretty good. Marvin Jones Jr. It's a big target. You can really put some air under that football, get behind the linebackers, trust him to sit down, and I do think you can trust him to make some of those grabs.
And as I'm editing this, one name that I keep thinking of is Antoine Green. If the Lions are using a lot of short motion and they're dragging the middle of the field, trying to set up some of those looks where they can get a big body receiver crossing middle of the field that's continuing to run, I would keep an eye on Antoine Green, because Marvin Jones Jr., guys like that can attack the zone, but a guy like Antoine Green could really spread a defense laterally, while at the same time he's been around. So if it's not going to be a ton of JAMO and maybe it's a very limited snap count, keep an eye on Green maybe just being a little bit more involved than we've seen.
Back shoulder fades, if they can get him one-on-one with one of those cornerbacks on the outside and they're playing cover 3 or playing cover 1 and you're not getting the shot that you want, look to try to get a one-on-one matchup and just take the shot to him on a fade route, something like that. So I think he gets potentially going a little bit this week. Overall, I'm going to say the Lions win this game. Being at home, I think, is huge, but I do think this is a tricky one. I'm really kind of weird on this one. Like, part of me feels like the floodgates come open and we could just absolutely bury them, and I would love that. We could go like 34-3. Like, I really think we could do that. We jump out, hit a couple shots early. I think we can make this game ugly in terms of we get them out of their game plan, we can run away with it. But the flip side of me says this is a legitimate defense. I like what I've seen from Bryce Young. I love what I've seen out of our defense. But the thing is I don't think this is an offense that just has massive holes. What's the quarterback doing? They can't run the ball at all. Like, I don't see that. And the offensive line doesn't look great, but I don't think they've been terrible. They seem to pick up in pass pro. So I don't think you can just roll over them offensively. It's just, can you get them out of their scheme? Because if you can't, they can be tough. But if you can, I think the floodgates come open. So really, I'm going to go 23-16. Actually, take that back. 23-13, I'm going to go Lions win. So I guess it opens up a little bit in this game. I think if they get up 2 scores like the Seattle game, they'll find a way to win it. So I'm going 23-13 Lions win at home, move to 4-1. This can be a tough one. Let me know who stands out, who has a big game to you. I just let you know. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.